There comes a moment when you realize the person you used to be can't take you where you're going. That version of you, however well-meaning, however hard they tried, has run their course. And the life you want, the strength you need, the future you're stepping into, that requires someone new. But the hardest part isn't becoming that new person. The hardest part is giving yourself permission to leave the old one behind. The one who settled, the one who hesitated, the one who lived in fear, in doubt, in hesitation. And the truth is, you don't owe that version of yourself anything. Not your loyalty, not your identity, not your excuses. Growth means walking away from who you were so you can become who you're meant to be. But most people won't do that. They cling to their past selves like a badge of honor. They say, that's just how I've always been. As if that's a reason to stay the same. As if repeating the past is more important than creating a future. But there is no freedom in that. No power in holding on to versions of yourself that no longer serve you. The new you, the one who's confident, focused, driven. That version of you deserves to move forward unchained. And you don't get there by asking permission from your past. You don't get there by dragging along your old patterns, your old habits, your old stories. You get there by drawing a line in the sand and saying, that's not me anymore. You don't owe the old you your comfort zone. You don't owe them an explanation. You don't owe them loyalty just because they got you this far. The truth is, they took you as far as they could. And now it's time for something greater. But most people feel guilt when they grow. They feel like they're abandoning who they were. But transformation is not betrayal. Growth is not disrespect. It's the most honest thing you can do. Because if you truly respect your past self, if you respect their struggle, their pain, their lessons, then you honor them by evolving. You honor them by refusing to let their limitations become your ceiling. This is not about forgetting where you came from. It's about choosing not to stay there. It's about building something new without having to justify what you're leaving behind. The new you doesn't owe the old you anything, except the commitment to become better. And once you understand that, you'll stop trying to fix the past and start building the future. Growth demands separation, not just from people, not just from habits, but from who you used to be, from the identity you wore like armor, from the excuses that kept you comfortable, from the narrative that gave you permission to stay small. The truth is, the old you isn't just a version you remember. It's a version you still carry in your thoughts, in your behaviors, in the way you talk to yourself when no one's listening. And unless you make a conscious decision to detach from that identity, it will follow you everywhere you go. It's subtle at first. You make progress. You start building something new. But then the old voice whispers, who do you think you are? And if you haven't separated from that voice, if you haven't told it clearly that its time is up, you start listening. You start shrinking again. You start apologizing for your growth. You start playing small so the old version of you doesn't feel threatened. But here's the truth. You cannot become your future while trying to comfort your past. There comes a moment where you have to look at the old version of yourself and say, thank you. Thank you for surviving. Thank you for getting me here. But we're not going the same direction anymore. And when you say that, something shifts. You stop explaining your transformation. You stop editing your growth to make it easier for your old identity to understand. You stop playing the role you've outgrown. But this isn't easy, because the old you is comfortable, predictable, familiar, And everything inside you will try to protect what feels familiar, even if it's holding you back. Your nervous system doesn't care about greatness. It cares about safety. It wants you to stay inside the parameters that kept you alive, even if those parameters are built on fear, built on scarcity, built on lies. So to grow, you have to disrupt that pattern. You have to consciously choose discomfort, choose uncertainty, choose the unknown over the outdated. And that choice feels like death to the old you, because in many ways it is. You are killing off the identity that can't come with you. You are laying to rest the mindset that has expired, and that's painful, but necessary. This is why so many people get stuck in cycles, because they want the results of the new identity while clinging to the behaviors of the old one. They say they want change, but they keep showing up with the same energy, the same boundaries, the same habits. And that's not how growth works. You don't get to keep the old and step into the new. You don't get to bring the baggage of your past into the future and expect to move freely. If you want to rise, you must release. That means letting go of guilt, letting go of regret, letting go of the pressure to carry every version of who you were on your back as some kind of tribute to your struggle. You are not required to stay loyal to who you were. You are not bound to the limits you once believed in. You are not obligated to continue patterns that kept you surviving, but never allowed you to thrive. The new you has different needs. The new you has higher standards. The new you doesn't have time for old stories, old cycles, old excuses. The new you is focused, committed, clear. And that clarity, that's what scares the past, because the past thrives in confusion, in loops, in uncertainty. But when you get clear, truly clear, your power becomes a threat to everything that once defined you. So if you feel resistance right now, good. That means you're on the edge of transformation. That means the old you is shaking. That means you're getting close to shedding what no longer belongs. This is the part where most people back down. They feel the pull of the old identity and they run back to it. They put down their progress and pick up their comfort, and then they wonder why nothing changes. But not you. You're here because you're ready to move forward. You're ready to grow beyond the familiar. You're ready to walk away from the identity that no longer fits. The new you doesn't owe the old you anything except gratitude and distance. You can thank that version of you and still choose to move on. You can honor their role in your survival and still leave them behind. When you grow, people will notice, and not everyone will celebrate it. The version of you that stayed quiet, agreeable, hesitant, that version was easier to accept. It didn't challenge anything. It didn't disrupt the room. It didn't make people question themselves. But the new you is dangerous to their comfort because you're not following the old script. You're not apologizing for evolving. You're not asking permission anymore. And the more you grow, the more you'll feel that tension. Not because you've done anything wrong, but because you've stopped pretending. You've stopped pretending to be fine with things that never sat right with you. You've stopped playing the part that kept other people comfortable. You've stopped performing the identity you've outgrown. That will trigger people who are still living in performance, people who haven't allowed themselves to change, people who see your growth as betrayal because it reminds them of the growth they're avoiding. You'll hear things like, "You've changed," as if that's a bad thing, as if staying the same is some kind of virtue. And in those moments, you'll be tempted to shrink, to soften your voice, to dim your light, to apologize for becoming more than you used to be. But don't. Because the new you doesn't owe the old environment an explanation. You didn't come this far just to stay palatable. You didn't grow just to go back. You didn't wake up just to fall asleep again. Your transformation is not a betrayal of your past. It's a breakthrough. It's the result of everything you endured, everything you learned, everything you survived. And the people who get it, truly get it, they won't try to hold you to who you used to be. They'll cheer for the person you're becoming. They'll see your evolution as inspiration, not rejection. But you'll lose some people. That's part of the process. That's the cost of growth. Not everyone gets to come with you. Not everyone wants to. And that's okay, because you're not responsible for keeping people comfortable while you suffocate. You're not responsible for staying small so they don't feel insecure. You're responsible for honoring your calling, for stepping into the life that's meant for you, for choosing alignment over approval. And sometimes that means walking alone, not forever, but for a season of shedding, a season of silence, a season of becoming. Because you can't become the new you if you're constantly dragging the weight of the old. And sometimes that weight is made of people, places, memories, habits, and you have to be willing to let go. Not with bitterness, not with anger, but with clarity. Clarity that says, I'm not who I was, and I don't owe who I was anymore of my future. There is nothing noble about staying stuck in an outdated version of yourself. Nothing admirable about ignoring your growth just to keep the peace. If the peace costs you your progress, it's not peace, it's paralysis. You have to be willing to disappoint people who only love the old you, the version of you that never challenged them, the version of you that stayed small so they wouldn't feel left behind. You're not here to be a monument to your past. You're here to be a movement for your future. And that means making decisions that feel selfish in the moment, but are sacred in the long run. Your future deserves your loyalty more than your past ever will. The version of you that's still waiting on the other side of discomfort, that's who you owe everything to. So if growth costs you something, good. That means you're shedding. That means you're evolving. That means you're becoming. And yes, it will feel unfamiliar, like standing in a new room where nothing fits just right. But give it time, because eventually the new you becomes home. The old you was built for survival, built in a time when all you could do was hold on, endure, make it through. You adapted to pain. You adjusted to scarcity. You figured out how to live under pressure. But just because you learned how to survive doesn't mean you were meant to stay there. Survival skills aren't made for seasons of peace. And if you don't update them, you'll sabotage the very stability you've been praying for. You cannot take survival behavior into a life that requires strategy, discipline, and expansion. Because what kept you safe before will limit you now. And here's where it gets hard. Your old self served a purpose. They protected you. They shielded you. They carried you through seasons you didn't think you'd survive. But survival comes at a cost. And now it's time to pay it. Because if you don't confront those patterns, you'll recreate them, even when life gets better, even when things are stable, even when the danger is gone. Your nervous system will still chase the old rhythm unless you teach it something new. You'll start fights just to feel something familiar. You'll chase chaos because calm feels foreign. You'll create stress because you've never known peace without guilt. This is what unhealed survival mode does. It convinces you that discomfort is home, and if you're not careful, you'll keep returning to the fire you already escaped, just because it's what you know. So what do? You reprogram. You teach your body that peace is not punishment, that stillness is not laziness, that safety does not mean weakness. You give yourself permission to thrive, not in theory, in practice, in your habits, in your thoughts, in your schedule, in your standards. You stop showing up like someone trying not to lose, and you start showing up like someone who deserves to win, someone who knows their worth, someone who's not afraid of success anymore. Because the old you may have been built for crisis, but the new you is built for creation, for structure, for impact, for purpose. But that transition doesn't happen by accident. You have to break the loyalty you've built with dysfunction. You have to stop romanticizing your struggle. You have to stop wearing pain like a badge of honor. You're allowed to be happy. You're allowed to be healthy. You're allowed to build a life that doesn't constantly hurt. You're allowed to put the sword down and stop fighting battles that are no longer yours. But that starts with honesty, radical, uncomfortable honesty about what's no longer serving you, about what you're still carrying that you don't need anymore, about the parts of you that are stuck in a season that's already over. You have to ask, what part of me is no longer required for the next chapter? What belief? What behavior? What identity? Because if you don't name it, you can't change it. And the old you will fight this process. They'll scream for attention. They'll whisper familiar doubts. They'll beg you to slow down, to stop, to stay small, because they don't know what it's like to be free. But you do, or at least you're starting to. And every time you move forward, every time you choose growth over comfort, you're proving to yourself that freedom is possible. It's not easy. It's not always pretty, but it's worth it. Because you weren't built to stay broken. You weren't built to stay stuck. You weren't built to live forever in the mindset of a version of you that didn't know better. You know now. You know what's possible. You know what's required. And knowing comes with responsibility. The responsibility to act, to move, to evolve. And that responsibility isn't a burden. It's a gift. It means you're no longer a prisoner of your past. It means you're the architect of your future. There's a moment in growth when you no longer recognize yourself, and that's not something to fear. It's something to honor, because the unfamiliar is the birthplace of transformation. You're not supposed to feel at home in the new you right away. You're not supposed to feel instantly comfortable in your power, your standards, your presence. You're learning to embody something you've never fully lived before. And that transition is awkward, like wearing clothes that don't quite fit yet, speaking a truth that still trembles in your throat, standing in a room you once thought was too big for you. But you don't shrink to match your old proportions. You grow to fill your new capacity. You keep showing up. You keep practicing the identity you're stepping into. You keep choosing the future over the familiarity. Because identity isn't just discovered, it's developed. It's forged in repetition, in courage, in daily decisions to act like the person you're becoming, not the person you've been. And there will be times when you're tempted to go back, not because you failed, but because it was easier. Easier to play small, easier to be understood, easier to not be questioned, challenged, or doubted. But ease isn't your compass anymore. Alignment is, integrity is, expansion is, and you can't expand by choosing comfort over conviction. So you learn to walk differently, to speak with clarity, to make decisions that reflect where you're headed, not where you've been. And yes, people will notice. They'll say you've changed. They'll say you're distant. They'll say you're full of yourself. But you are full of vision, of purpose, of self-respect. And if they can't handle the version of you that no longer plays small, that's not your problem to solve. You didn't work this hard just to stay apologetic. You didn't break cycles just to pretend you're still in them. You didn't unlearn survival just to explain why you finally feel alive. You're not cold for setting boundaries. You're not arrogant for knowing your worth. You're not selfish for prioritizing your evolution. You're free, and freedom will always be misinterpreted by those who are still shackled to the past. But that's not your responsibility. Your responsibility is to honor the new version of yourself, the one that made it through, the one that refused to stay buried, the one that showed up when it was easier to disappear. You owe that version of you everything. You owe them consistency. You owe them follow-through. You owe them a life that reflects the healing they fought for. And that means you stop rehearsing the story that kept you small. You stop defending the mindset that once kept you safe but now keeps you stuck. You stop giving power to the wounds you've already outgrown. You shift. You elevate, you evolve, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's lonely, even when no one claps for you. Because you weren't created to stay the same. You were created to transform, to expand, to lead, to embody. And that process doesn't come with a map. It comes with momentum. You keep showing up to your own growth, even when it's awkward, even when the old you is screaming for relevance, even when people miss the version of you that didn't challenge their limitations. That's not your concern anymore, because the new you is focused. The new you has standards. The new you doesn't need to explain evolution to people who prefer comfort over courage. You don't owe the old version of yourself another moment of stagnation. You don't owe them your present. You don't owe them your future. You gave them enough. It's time to give to the version of you that's becoming, the one that's been waiting patiently for you to stop asking for permission and start owning who you are now. The most liberating decision you will ever make is to stop proving yourself to your past. That version of you doesn't get to decide who you are anymore. You've changed. You've grown, and your only job now is to live like it. You don't have to keep checking in with the mindset you outgrew. You don't have to ask if it's okay to move forward. You don't have to make your progress palatable to the version of you that couldn't see this far ahead. That's what holds most people back. Not fear of failure, but fear of disloyalty to the story they told themselves for years. But your story was never supposed to be a prison. It was supposed to be a passage, a path, a process. And just because you started one way doesn't mean you have to finish the same. There's nothing noble about dragging around an outdated identity. You're allowed to shift. You're allowed to evolve. You're allowed to wake up and say, I'm not that person anymore. You're not the insecure one anymore. You're not the one who always procrastinates. You're not the one who lets fear make decisions. That version of you might have been true once, but it's not true now. Unless you keep repeating it, unless you keep identifying with it, unless you keep dragging that identity into rooms it no longer belongs in. But now, you're in a different room, different rules, different pace, different standard, and you don't owe anyone, including your old self, an explanation for adjusting to a higher level. Because you didn't come this far just to negotiate with your old mindset. You came to embody a new one, to walk like it, to speak like it, to move like it, every single day. That means you stop clinging to the version of you who needed everyone's approval. You stop deferring to the voice in your head that only knew how to survive. You stop dragging the pain around like a name tag. Pain is not your personality. Struggle is not your identity. That was just the version of you that did what they had to do. But now it's your job to become the version of you that's ready to do what you're called to do. And that version, they're built different. They're not asking the world for permission to evolve. They're not checking in with their past for validation. They've made peace with who they were, and they're committed to who they're becoming. That kind of clarity changes your entire pace. You move faster. You hesitate less. You stop over-explaining your worth. You stop entertaining conversations that belong to your old chapter. You don't need to explain your peace. You don't need to justify your boundaries. You don't need to carry guilt for outgrowing the people who only knew how to love your brokenness.